The rain hit the hospice window in slow, tired drops. I sat next to my brother's bed, holding his hand, watching the machine beep in that same steady rhythm it always did. Jake hadn't opened his eyes in 2 days. The nurse said it wouldn't be long now. I believed her. I'd believed her for a week. I hadn't slept in my own bed since Tuesday. My clothes smelled like hospital soap and stale coffee. My wife Danielle kept texting me, asking if I needed anything, and I kept typing the same reply. I'm okay, just tired. I wasn't okay. I was watching my little brother disappear one breath at a time, and there was nothing I could do but sit there and hold on. That night, around 11, I stepped into the hallway to stretch my legs. The lights were dim, the kind of dim that makes a hospital feel like a church. That's when I saw her, the old woman from the room across the hall. Mrs. Whitfield, the nurses called her. She never had visitors. She always kept her door cracked, like she was watching the hallway. She was standing in her doorway that night, gripping the frame with a thin, trembling hand. Her eyes found mine, sharp and clear, nothing like the confused stare I'd gotten used to seeing from her. "Drive home tonight," she whispered, "before it's too late." I froze. Too late for what? She didn't answer. She just closed her door. My heart was still pounding when I walked back into Jake's room. I told myself she was confused. Sick people say strange things. Dementia, medication, fear of dying alone. It could have been anything. But something about the way she looked at me didn't feel confused at all. It felt like a warning. I sat back down next to Jake's bed. His chest rose and fell, slow and shallow. I squeezed his hand like I could will him to stay. "You're not going anywhere, not yet." I tried to shake off what Mrs. Whitfield said. I almost convinced myself. Then my phone buzzed on the little table beside me. It was Danielle, a photo, our house from the outside, taken from her car in the driveway. The porch light was off. I always left it on. "Everything okay?" she texted. "Garage door was open when I got home. Didn't touch anything, just locked it." I stared at the screen. I hadn't left the garage open. I never left the garage open. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I looked over my shoulder at the door, half expecting to see the old woman standing there again. The hallway was empty, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet beep of Jake's monitor. I told Danielle to lock every door and turn on the alarm. She asked why. I didn't have an answer that made sense, not yet. All I had was a stranger's whisper and a bad feeling I couldn't shake. I stayed on the phone with Danielle for almost 10 minutes, walking her through the house room by room like I could see it through her eyes. Front door, locked. Back door, locked. Kids' bedroom windows, locked. She kept asking why I was so worked up over an open garage door. I didn't tell her about Mrs. Whitfield. It sounded crazy even in my head. After we hung up, I sat there staring at Jake's face. He looked so much smaller than he used to. Jake was the strong one growing up, the one who fixed cars and carried furniture and never asked for help. Now he couldn't lift his own hand. Around midnight, a nurse named Carol came in to check his vitals. She was kind, always spoke softly, like she understood grief lived in that room with us. I asked her about Mrs. Whitfield. Her face changed just for a second. "She doesn't get many visitors," Carol said carefully. "Family stopped coming a long time ago." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. She just adjusted Jake's blanket and said, "Get some rest if you can, Mr. Bennett. Long night ahead." Long night ahead. The words sat heavy in my chest. I looked at Jake, then at the door, then at my phone, still warm from Danielle's call. Something was happening. Something bigger than a confused old woman's whisper, and I had a feeling I wasn't ready for what it was. I didn't sleep. I sat there in that stiff hospital chair with my arms crossed, watching the door, waiting for something I couldn't name. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, uneven. I got up and looked out. It was Mrs. Whitfield again, shuffling towards the nurse's station in her thin robe, one hand dragging along the wall for balance. I almost went back inside. Then I heard her say my brother's name. "Jake Bennett,"
she murmured to no one, or maybe to herself. I stepped into the hallway. "What did you say?" She turned to me slowly. Up close, her eyes weren't cloudy like I expected from someone her age. They were sharp, focused, almost angry. "You don't know who your father really was, do you?"
My chest tightened. "My father died when I was a kid. Car accident." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "Is that what they told you?" Before I could ask anything else, Carol appeared behind her, gently taking her arm. "Mrs. Whitfield, let's get you back to bed." The old woman didn't fight it, but she kept her eyes locked on mine the whole time, like she was trying to hand me something without words. As Carol led her away, she said one more thing over her shoulder. "Ask your mother about the fire." Then she was gone, back into her room, door closing softly behind her. I stood in that hallway, frozen, feeling like the floor had shifted under me. I didn't go back to Jake's room right away. I stood in that hallway for a long time, her words echoing in my head. "Ask your mother about the fire." What fire? My father died in a car accident on Route 9 when I was 7. That's what I'd been told my whole life. That's what was written on his death certificate, the one my mother kept in a metal box in her closet. I finally sat back down beside Jake. His hand felt cool in mine. I pressed my fingers against his wrist, feeling for his pulse, counting the beats just to have something steady to hold on to. Around 4 in the morning, I called my mother. It rang 6 times before she picked up, her voice thick with sleep. "Tommy, what's wrong? Is it Jake?" "No, Mom, he's the same." I paused, my mouth suddenly dry. "I need to ask you something. About Dad." Silence on the line, long enough that I thought the call dropped. "Mom? Why are you asking about your father at 4 in the morning? There's a woman here, at the hospice. She said to ask you about a fire." The silence that followed was different this time, heavier. I heard her breath catch, just slightly, like she'd been struck. "Mom, what fire?" "I have to go, Tommy," she said, her voice suddenly tight and rushed. "We'll talk when you get home." She hung up before I could say another word. I sat there holding a dead phone, staring at Jake's pale face, feeling like everything I thought I knew about my family was starting to crack down the middle. I didn't call her back. I knew that tone. My mother used it whenever a conversation was over before I wanted it to be. Something about the fear in her voice bothered me more than the old woman's whisper ever could. Around 6, the sun started coming through the blinds, painting thin gray light across Jake's face. He looked peaceful at least. That was the one mercy in all of it. The doctor came by on his morning rounds, checked the chart, spoke to me in that gentle, practiced voice doctors use when they're preparing you for the worst. "His numbers are stable for now," he said, "but I want to be honest with you. We're talking days, not weeks." I nodded like I understood, even though nothing about it felt real. After he left, I stepped out for coffee in the family lounge down the hall. That's where I ran into Carol again, refilling the coffee pot. I asked her, straight out, what history Mrs. Whitfield had with our family. Carol glanced around before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "She used to live 2 houses down from your parents, back before everything happened." "Before what happened?"
Carol's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "There was a house fire years ago. Someone died. I don't know all the details. I was just a kid myself, but people in town still talk about it sometimes." My stomach dropped. Died? Who died? Carol looked at me with something between pity and fear. "I think you need to ask your mother that, Mr. Bennett, not me." She left the lounge quickly, leaving her coffee cup abandoned on the counter, like she regretted saying anything at all. I stood there in the empty lounge, the coffee pot still gurgling behind me, and for the first time in days, I forgot about Jake for a few seconds. All I could think about was a fire I never knew existed, and a father I thought I understood. I went back to his room and sat down, but my mind kept drifting. I thought about the old photo albums in my mother's closet, the ones she never let us look through as kids. I thought about how she flinched every time someone mentioned Route 9, even years later, like the road itself had done something to her. Around 9 that morning, my mother showed up at the hospice. She hadn't been there in 3 days, said she couldn't bear to watch Jake fade like that. But there she was, standing in the doorway, purse clutched against her chest like armor. "You look terrible," she said, trying to smile. "Mom, I need you to tell me about the fire." Her smile disappeared. She glanced at Jake's sleeping face, then back at me. "Not here. Not now." "Then when? She's been dropping hints for 2 days. Someone died in a fire connected to Dad, and everyone wants me to ask you, but you keep running." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but her jaw tightened, stubborn the way it always got when she was cornered. "Your father wasn't the man you think he was, Tommy." "What does that mean?" She sat down heavily in the chair across from me, staring at Jake instead of me, like it was easier to say it to him. "The fire wasn't an accident, and it wasn't strangers who died in it." My hands went cold. "Mom, who died?" She twisted her wedding ring, the one she still wore even though my father had been almost 30 years. "Her name was Ruth Whitfield's daughter, Susan." The room tilted a little. "Whitfield, as in the woman across the hall?"
Mom nodded slowly, tears finally spilling over. "Your father and Susan, they were involved. An affair, Tommy. It went on for almost a year before I found out." I felt sick. What does that have to do with a fire? The night I found out, there was a confrontation. At their house, not ours. Ruth was there too. She'd found out the same night. Things got heated. A candle got knocked over. Curtains caught fire. Susan didn't make it out in time. Her voice cracked. "Your father tried to save her. That's how he got the burns on his arms, the ones he always said were from a work accident." I sat there stunned, memories rearranging themselves in my head. The long sleeves he always wore, even in summer, the way he flinched when anyone touched his forearms. And the car accident? Mom wiped her face with a shaking hand. "There was no accident, Tommy. Your father couldn't live with what happened. He drove into that guardrail on purpose. I've carried that lie for 30 years to protect you and Jake." I looked at my dying brother, then at my mother's broken face, and I realized the woman across the hall wasn't confused at all. She was the mother of the woman my father loved and the widow he left behind. I didn't know what to say. 30 years of believing a lie, and it all came apart in a hospice hallway because an old woman couldn't keep quiet anymore. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw not just grief, but guilt she'd been carrying alone since I could even walk. "Does Jake know?" I asked. She shook her head. "No one knows, just me, and apparently Ruth." I stood up, needing air, needing space from all of it. That's when I remembered the warning, "Drive home tonight." Why would any of this mean I needed to leave the hospital, unless it wasn't about the past at all, unless it was about right now? I stepped into the hallway and knocked on Mrs. Whitfield's door. No answer. I pushed it open slightly. Her bed was empty, sheets pulled back like she'd left in a hurry. A nurse I didn't recognize was changing the linens. "Where is she?" I asked. "Discharged this morning. Family came and took her home unexpectedly. Said it was urgent." Urgent. My skin prickled. I pulled out my phone and called Danielle again. It rang 4 times before she picked up, her voice off, distracted. "Tommy, there's a car parked outside. Been sitting there for almost an hour. I don't recognize it." My blood ran cold. "Description, now." "Dark sedan, older model. There's a woman in the passenger seat just watching the house."
I looked at Jake's door, then back toward the hallway where Mrs. Whitfield's room sat empty, and I understood with sudden, terrifying clarity that the warning hadn't been about a secret from 30 years ago. It was about something happening tonight. I told Danielle to grab the kids and lock themselves in the bedroom upstairs, the one with the deadbolt we'd installed after a break-in scare 2 years back. My voice must have carried real fear because she didn't argue, didn't ask questions. I heard her moving fast, calling for Emma and Noah.
I looked at Jake, machine still beeping steady, and I felt something tear inside me. I couldn't leave him. Not like this. Not when the doctor said days, not weeks. My mother grabbed my arm. "Go, Tommy. I'll stay with him. I'm not going anywhere." "Mom, I can't just..." "You have a wife and children in danger. Jake would tell you the same thing if he could talk right now. Go." I hesitated one more second, pressing my hand against Jake's, whispering that I'd be back, that he needed to hold on just a little longer. Then I ran. In the parking lot, I called the police, gave them Danielle's description of the car. The dispatcher said units were already close by. Another call had come in about suspicious activity on our street. Someone else had seen the same car. Driving home, my hands shook on the wheel. Streetlights blurred past. I kept replaying Mrs. Whitfield's warning, wondering if her sudden discharge and this car outside my house were connected, wondering who would still be angry enough after 30 years to come looking for my family. Then it hit me. Ruth Whitfield had a son, Susan's brother, a man who would have grown up hating my father's name. I pulled onto my street just as a police cruiser rounded the corner behind me, lights flashing but silent. The dark sedan was still there, parked crooked against the curb, like whoever was inside hadn't planned on staying long. My headlights swept across it, and I saw a man in the driver's seat sit up straight, startled. I threw my car into park and ran up my own driveway, heart slamming against my ribs. The front door was still locked, thank God. I could see a shadow moving upstairs behind the bedroom curtains. Danielle, safe. The police officer approached the sedan with his hand near his holster, calm but alert. I stood frozen on my lawn, watching as the passenger door opened first. An older woman stepped out first, Ruth Whitfield, wrapped in a cardigan, looking smaller and more fragile out here than she ever had in that hospital bed. "Ma'am, sir, I need you both to step away from the vehicle," the officer said. The man got out next, maybe in his 50s, gray at the temples, jaw tight with something that looked like grief more than rage. He raised his hand slowly. "We weren't going to hurt anyone," he said, voice cracking. "My mother just wanted to see the house, where my sister's story finally ended up. She's been talking about the fire for weeks, ever since she got sick. I didn't know how else to give her peace." I stepped closer, my legs still shaking. "You scared my wife half to death." Ruth looked at me, eyes wet, and said quietly, "I only wanted to warn you before it was too late. Everything else, that was just an old woman needing closure." The officer let out a slow breath, lowering his hand from his holster. He asked a few more questions, checked identification, and after several tense minutes, decided no crime had actually been committed. Frightening, yes. Illegal, no. Ruth and her son, Michael, weren't arrested. They were asked to leave, and they did, but not before Ruth turned back one last time. "Your father was a coward," she said, no anger left in her voice, just exhaustion. "I've hated your family for 30 years. Lying here, dying down the hall from your brother, I realized I didn't want to carry that hate into whatever comes next. I just wanted you to know the truth, and I wanted you home safe tonight. That's all." Michael helped her back into the car, and they drove off into the dark, taillights fading down the street. I went inside and held Danielle and the kids for a long time,
none of us saying much, just breathing together in the quiet of our living room. Then I drove back to the hospice, back to Jake, back to my mother sitting exactly where I'd left her, holding his hand like she'd never let go. Jake passed away 4 days later, peacefully, with all of us around him. Mrs. Whitfield passed 2 days after that. I never saw her again after that night in the driveway, but I think about her often. A woman who carried 30 years of grief and hatred and chose, at the very end, to turn it into a warning instead of revenge. My father's secret nearly cost my family everything, decades after he was gone. But it also taught me something I'll never forget. The truth doesn't disappear just because we bury it. Sooner or later, it finds its way home, whether we're ready or not.